We are Flip Data Academy. We're exploring the world of data, analytics, and business intelligence and sharing everything that we learn with you. We have how-to videos, we break down complex topics into bite-sized learning nuggets, we share full-length training videos and show you how to revolutionize the way you use data, all in the tools that you love. So join us on our YouTube journey, and if you like what we do, check out our content-filled website to join our community and see our premium training courses. Hi there, this is Josh from Flip Data, and today we're going to look at VLOOKUP in Excel. Now, I bet this describes your situation perfectly because I see it time and time again. People begin using Excel, they start getting better and better at it, start inputting some formulas, some automation, some interaction with the Excel sheets. They get better and better, and Excel starts becoming more prolific in their day-to-day working life. Then suddenly you find the need to use a VLOOKUP formula, and now you're thrown into a world of arguments, formulas, and VLOOKUP just doesn't quite work in the way you expect or want it to. I see it happen over and over again. VLOOKUP seems to be that next level of evolution to improve your capability at Excel. So everyone sort of reaches this barrier of VLOOKUP. Well, I'm here to help you overcome that barrier and start improving at Excel. So in this video, I'm going to share with you everything that you need to know to master VLOOKUP. So now join me on the computer screen where I'll start breaking it down for you and showing you some examples of how to use it. So let's begin with the definition of VLOOKUP. In the top left, you can see we have the definition. So VLOOKUP searches down a list for a specified value, in this case, Renee Hazard. Once that match has been found, it moves along the same row to a particular column and then returns the value from that column. In this case, we're returning email, but we could have also returned customer ID if we wanted. So here in this box, we have the VLOOKUP formula. So under where it says return, this box here with the email address has the VLOOKUP formula. What it's doing is it's searching down this list of names for Renee Hazard. Once it finds Renee Hazard, I've told it to return the value from the second box to the right, which represents email, and return the email address. So let's investigate this VLOOKUP formula a little more and understand how it comes together. So if I select the cell where the formula is, in the formula bar in the top left, you can see it written out. It looks a little confusing at first, but trust me, it's quite easy when it's broken down for you. So let me break down the formula and explain what it's actually doing. In this box here, you can see some information about VLOOKUP. What we have here in this row is the syntax. The syntax just refers to the arguments that the VLOOKUP formula takes and the order in which you're supposed to input them. So what we have is equals, so we know that this cell is actually going to be a formula, then VLOOKUP to indicate that this formula is the VLOOKUP, and then we have the arguments that it takes. So VLOOKUP starts with a lookup value, then a table array, then the column index number, and then the ranged lookup. So what these mean are, the lookup value is the value we're looking for. So in this case, we're looking for Renee Hazard. So what you do is we input G9, which refers to the cell that contains the value that we're looking for. Then we have the table array. This is the range of values where we're going to find Renee Hazard. In this case, it's this table here, from B9 all the way down to D28. Then we have the column index number. Now, this can be a bit confusing, but the column index number refers to the cell where we want to return the value once we've found a match. In this case, we're returning email. So the VLOOKUP searches down this list, it finds the value we're looking for, Renee Hazard, and then we input the number of the cell where we want to return the value, which means in this case, email, which is the 1, 2, 3. So it's the third column where we want to return the value. That's why we have a 3 in this case. If I change this to a 2, it would return the customer ID. And if I change this to a 1, it would return the name Renee Hazard. Finally, we have the range lookup. Now, this is a little complicated. It's a true or false statement. It refers to an exact or an approximate match of what it's looking for. I recommend always go with the exact match because the approximate match gets into some pretty detailed expert territory. 99% of the time, you're going to want to do an exact match. So for a beginner, just go with exact match. Okay, so that's the VLOOKUP formula. Let's look at creating our own lookups now. So here we are on the second tab called Create Your VLOOKUP. I recommend you download this working file so you can follow along with this example. As well, the working file contains a lot more practice examples because the best way to improve at VLOOKUP is to just practice doing them. So here we have a question. What is Holly Goodwin's customer ID? In this cell here, what we want to do is create a VLOOKUP formula that looks down this list, finds Holly Goodwin, and then returns the customer ID. Before we create the formula, there's something important you should note about VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP only searches down the leftmost column and can only return values to the right of that column, which means in this table, we can only search for the name and then return either the name, customer ID, or email, because the name is the far left column and then the customer ID and the email are to the right. We can't search for email and return the name because the email is on the far right column and the name is to the left of that column, because VLOOKUP always starts on the left and then moves right. Okay, with that in mind, let's start creating our VLOOKUP formula. As you know, all formulas begin with an equals sign, so I'm going to start by typing in equals, and then I'm going to start typing the name of the formula, which is VLOOKUP. You'll notice Excel prompts you with the name of the formula once you begin typing it. To use it, I'm just going to give that a double click. Now, VLOOKUP gives me the list of arguments in the order that it wants you to input them, and we start with the lookup value. So as you know, the lookup value is the value we're looking for. So we're looking for Holly Goodwin, which is contained in the cell F5. So I can click that cell or type in F5 to reference it. Now VLOOKUP will look for anything contained in this cell. I could have also achieved this by just typing the word Holly Goodwin between speech marks, and that would also look for Holly Goodwin. Now that we've input the first argument, we separate them with a comma. So I'm going to press comma, and you'll notice we've moved to the second argument, the table array. So the table array needs to contain the entire table where you will find the value you're looking for, as well as the value you want to return. So we're looking for the name, so we start at the top of the name value, and then we're returning the customer ID. So we go all the way to the bottom of the list that contains customer ID. So this is our table array. We're looking from all of the list of names and returning something from the customer ID. We don't need to include email here because we're not returning the email. Now that we've input this argument, I can separate it with a comma and move to the next, which is the column index number. So this refers to the column number that contains the value that we're trying to return. So you know we're trying to return the customer ID. In our selected table range, we have two columns. Column 1 is the name, and column 2 is the customer ID. We want to return the customer ID, which is in column 2, so we're going to input a 2. If we input a 1, it would just return the name back to us. If we inputted a 3, we'd get an error because our table range doesn't contain the email column, therefore there is no column 3 in our selected range. Now that we've input that, I'm going to separate it with a comma, and we get to the final argument of our formula, which is a true or false between an approximate match and an exact match. As you know, we always want to go with exact match, unless you're a more advanced user, in which case there is a purpose for the approximate match, but 99% of the time we go with exact match, so I recommend pretty much always choosing exact. So I can either type in false, or I can just double click that and input it. Now that we've finished our formula, I'm going to close it off with a bracket, and then I'm going to hit enter to execute that formula. And what it's done is it's returned the value 286. We can check if that was correct. So we can scan down the list, find Holly Goodwin, check Holly's customer ID is 286, and we know that this is correct. So that was a simple VLOOKUP formula. It might have been a little confusing at first, but just keep practicing and trust me, it will become second nature to you. So let's take a look at another way we can use VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP isn't just about returning a single value, we can do it in an entire table. So here I'm going to go to the Populate Table tab. And what we have here is a sales table that shows us a transaction ID, the name of a customer, and the product that they bought. And we can input a VLOOKUP formula in this column to return to us the cost of the product, as well as the email of the customer. So let's see how we do that. Let's begin with the cost of the table. So I'm going to start by inputting a equals. As you know, that's how we indicate that this cell contains a formula. So I'm going to input equals and I'm going to start typing in VLOOKUP. I'm going to double click it once it prompts me to. Then we have our list of arguments. So the first thing we want to look up is the product name. So we can reference the cell that contains the product name. Here it is D5. So I'm just going to select D5. Then I'm going to enter a comma to separate my argument, and I want to get the table array. So here is the product table. We're looking for the product name and we're returning the cost. So I'm going to select everything in the product column and everything in the cost column. Then I'm going to separate those arguments with a comma. And the column index we're returning is the cost, which is in column number 2. So I'm going to input a 2. Then I'm going to separate those arguments with another comma. And finally, as always, we're going to do exact match. So I'm going to double click that. I'm going to close off my formula with a bracket and I'm going to hit enter. Then we return the cost. So how do we create this formula in every cell of this table? Now, we could input it each and every time. That wouldn't be very effective. But if you have the cell selected, you can see this little box in the bottom right corner. When I go over it, you'll notice my mouse changes to this black X. With that selected, I can double click it and then it inputs the formula into all these cells. But you notice we're getting an error in a few of them. So let's investigate why this error isn't working. If I select the error, we can see the formula. Now here's a little trick in Excel. If you click on the formula bar, it then tells you there are cells that it's referencing, and you can see that it's shifted downwards. So now it's not referencing the entire product table correctly. If I select the first formula and then select the formula bar, you can see it's referencing the product table correctly. This is a common error in VLOOKUP. As you move the formula down, you'll notice that it references the next product in the list. If I go down to the next one, I can see that it references the next product in the list. But it's also doing the same thing with our product table. As we shift down from cell to cell, the range we're selecting from the products also does. So what we need to do is lock this range in place. So to do that, with the first formula selected, what we can do is select the part of the formula that references the table, so here, and then what you want to do is press F4. So if you press F4 with that part selected, you notice it inputs these little dollar symbols between the cell references. That locks the table in place. So now let's recreate that. So I've got my formula selected. I'm going to double click here and then it replaces the formula down the rest of the table. And then if I select them, you'll notice the errors have disappeared. If I select one, select the formula bar, you'll notice that the product table range has been locked in place. But the product we're referencing moves down cell by cell as the formula does. So that's a pretty common error that happens in VLOOKUP when you're inputting it into the tables. So just make sure you've locked your table array in place by selecting it and pressing F4. Okay, so we can now create and move on to our second VLOOKUP in this table. What we want to do is return the email. The email table isn't actually contained in the same sheet. With VLOOKUP, you can return a value from a different sheet if you want. So let's see how that works. I'm just going to start by typing in equals because you know that's how we start a formula. I'm going to begin inputting VLOOKUP. I can double click it to select it. Then we want our VLOOKUP value, which is the customer name. So I'm just going to click the cell that contains the customer name. I'm going to hit comma to separate the arguments and then our table array. So our table is actually on a different sheet and we can do that in VLOOKUP. I'm just going to go to that sheet, which is the second sheet. I'm going to select our table range, which is the name and the email. So with that selected, and then I can then move on to the next part of the formula. So I can hit comma. We're trying to return the email, which is the third column in our selected range. So I'm going to input a 3, and then I'll put another comma, and we want to do exact match as always, and close this off. So I'm going to close the bracket to finish our formula. Remember, we need to lock that range in place. So with this part of the formula selected, I'm just going to hit F4. So I just need to select that part of the range and hit F4. And you'll notice it's input our dollar symbols, locks that range in place. Then to execute the formula, I just hit enter. Then we've got the email address of the customer, and to input this formula into every cell in our table, I have it selected. The bottom right, you'll find the little box. I'm going to give that a double click, and it's going to input the formula into the rest of our table. So that is everything to do with VLOOKUP. Remember, Excel is one of those tools where it's easy to learn the syntax of a formula and how to apply it, but you only improve through practice. So if you want to download a working file that contains loads of practice examples so you can practice putting together the formulas, you can find that file in the description below. So go out there, practice putting together your VLOOKUP formulas. Okay, so that was all that you need to know to start using VLOOKUP in Excel. VLOOKUP is one of those things where you only get better through practice, so keep practicing and you will get better at using it. There's many different ways to use VLOOKUP, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments below on the ways that you use VLOOKUP in your worksheets. So thanks for watching. If you like this series that we're doing on all of the formulas in Excel, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update on these videos. Thanks for watching. We don't just make informative YouTube videos. On our website, we share free and premium courses, job aids, resources, webinars, and more. So if you like what we do, check it out. You can also find us on major learning platforms such as Udemy and Skillshare. Links to everything can be found in the description. Before you go, don't forget to hit that subscribe and notification bell to never miss an update. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.